You know, there are hundreds of lost mines in this world, and the Southwest and Arizona certainly has its share of them. And chief among them is the Lost Dutchman gold mine. The Lost Dutchman gold mine ranks right up there with the search for the Holy Grail, the Noah's Ark, and King Solomon's mine. None of them have been more enduring, or long-lasting, because I can't say that, as the Lost Dutchman gold mine. Tom Collenborn and I were putting together the paperwork for the museum to get tax-exempt status and what have you. We learned from the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce that the second most asked question in Arizona after the Grand Canyon was about the Lost Dutchman gold mine. It wasn't the Superstition Mountains they were asking about. It wasn't Jacob Waltz they were asking about. It was the Lost Dutchman gold mine. How did it get started? How does it endure so long? And who are the people that are involved searching for the Lost Dutchman mine? What kind of people are these? It actually didn't start with the Lost Dutchman gold mine. It started with the search for Dr. Thorne's lost mine. Now, we've done a story on the Lost Thorne mine, and I invite you to go back and see that. It's a very interesting story. It started with a fellow named Cooley who met Mr. Thorne over in New Mexico. Cooley was a former Army man and also packed for the Army after the Civil War. And him and a couple of his friends went out searching for it and were interrupted by Apache Indians who didn't want them to cross into their territory. So that search didn't come to any fruition. And Banta, who was with the group, he was a newspaper man, and he began putting the word out on this Thorne mine, and that generated a great deal of interest to where several brigades from 4 or 5 different towns came together and formed a search group of 267 men who went out searching for the Lost Dutchman mine. There's a man named Milton Rose who claimed that Jacob Waltz was in that search group of 267 men, and when although they found some placer gold over in the Pinal Mountains, they filed some claims and stuff like that. Eventually, everybody dissolved and went back to where they came from. One man, Jacob Waltz, continued to search on his own. So evidently, Jacob Waltz did find something. There was real gold under his bed when he died. It was assayed by real people and made into jewelry and stuff of that nature. Some people that were involved at that time was Julia Thomas and Ronnie Petrash, who were taking care of Waltz on his deathbed. We have stories about that you can go back and watch. And Richard Holmes and Gideon Roberts were actually with him on his deathbed. And this is what began the search. Julia Thomas had a bakery and an ice cream store, and she sold everything she had there and financed the trip into the Superstition Mountains after Jacob Waltz died. So in 1892, and the end of July and into August, in the hottest part of the year in Arizona, Julia and Riney and his brother and his dad all went out searching for the mine, and of course, they didn't find a thing. Well, when they got back, she was broke, and she began selling maps for about $7 a piece back then. That's quite a bit of money today. And then she was interviewed by a newspaper man by the name of P.C. Bicknell. And this is really where the Lost Dutchman legend got its real start. Because when Julia come back, there was a small article put in the paper called The Queer Quest that made just a blurb about Julia and her search, and that she didn't find anything. Everybody in Phoenix at that time Phoenix was only 2 blocks wide and 3 blocks long. Everybody in Phoenix knew that she didn't find the mine. But apparently Bicknell paid her a little money for the story, and the story was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, and however it works, it gets out into other newspapers, and people, it really piqued the interest of people, and they started searching for the Lost Dutchman mine. How does it continue to endure, though? What makes it so fascinating? People knew that they didn't find anything, but Bicknell kept putting out a couple of stories in 1894 and 1895, and it just continued to keep people interested in this search for the Lost Dutchman mine. Then, of course, we had Adolph Ruth, Dr. Ruth, who in 1931 went out there and lost his life, and a great search for his body took place, and this was well publicized, and more people became interested in the Lost Dutchman gold mine, and more people were searching. Then you had a fellow named Tumlinson who was associated with the stone maps that were found in 1949. And this began a whole nother round of searching. And that story was eventually published in Life magazine. And that was worldwide attention that was put on the Lost Dutchman gold mine. Then there was Killer Mountain by a detective from Oklahoma City who done a lot of research and done a fantastic job of organizing and financing a search in the Lost Dutchman. And they tried their best to keep it a secret when they found this, what they thought was the Lost Dutchman mine. But it got out into the newspapers, and here we go with a whole nother round of searching by a lot of people. Then we have Chuck Kenworthy, a very successful deep sea treasure hunter who was partnered for a time with John Wayne and knew of Tom Collenborn, and he come out here and got with Tom and rented a helicopter, and they flew the Superstitions with a magnetometer. They hit a couple of hot spots out there, particularly in the Peters Mesa area, and this just keeps the ball rolling about the search for the Lost Dutchman gold mine. You have people that associate Dutch hunters with the knuckle-dragging Neanderthal man, all bearded and wearing animal skins, and about the ugliest person you ever saw in your life. But you know, if you clean him up a little bit, give him a shave and a haircut, he wouldn't draw a second look in a New York subway. A great many of these people who have passed away, all of them that I'm talking about, were former military people. Richard Holmes was a packer for the Army, and he was a scout for the Army, and he packed for Al Sieber, of all people. Brownie Holmes, his son, was a veteran of World War I. You have Bill Barkley, the brother of Tex Barkley, the Quarter Circle U Ranch. Bill Barkley was a veteran of World War I, and in fact his wife gave me his uniform, and that uniform is used in the color guard of America's mounted military history that we took to 2 presidential inaugurals and was on display in a museum for nearly 20 years. And of course, the feud between Ed Piper and Celeste Jones was another key factor that kept this story alive, and the interest that people saw in searching for the Lost Dutchman gold mine. And she's reputed to be an opera singer. I don't think anybody's ever proven that, but that's one of the things that just lasts forever about her being an opera singer. Then you have Bud Lane, a veteran of World War II. He was in the Navy, and he packed and took care of horses for several of the people that had stables around Apache Junction, and he took many trips into the Superstitions, taking people on horseback rides. And of course, there's Crazy Jake. Well, Crazy Jake was a Korean War veteran, and I'm not so sure he was crazy. unless it was crazy like a fox, because he bilked people out of millions of dollars. And I've had many dealings with Jake. He was living on some doctor's ranch down in Chandler, and there was a lot of horses down there. Of course, they didn't belong to him, but I rented horses from him that didn't belong to him. Of course, he was using most of the money for renting the horses to feed them. But I never done anything with Jake that was even slightly offhand. Every deal we made, the money amount stayed the same, and if he was going to bring the horses to my house, he brought them to my house. If I was going to pick them up down there, everything worked well. Jim Att was an Air Force veteran, and he was a trained radiation technician for 3 Mile Island of all places. And he worked at Palo Verde, and he gave up this job to be a caretaker out here at the northernmost end of the Superstition mining district. And he spent the rest of his life searching for the Lost Dutchman gold mine. Robert E. Lee was a veteran of World War II. He made a documentary on the Lost Dutchman gold mine that's available if you look it up on the internet. And you have Doc Rosecrans, who was a veteran of World War II. Andy Sinbad. I visited Sinbad one time at his claim, which is just half a mile from the museum today. And of course it no longer exists, but he invited me in his house, and the first thing I saw was a model of about an 18-inch wingspan of a P-51 fighter, my best loved plane of all, the P-51 fighter plane. When I was a kid in California, my folks worked at Lockheed, and I used to lay out on the lawn at our house and watch them dogfighting over Sunland, California, which is just across the hill from Lockheed Aircraft. Then you have Don Shade. Don Shade was a sergeant major during World War II, and he's the one that found the body of Walt Kassler and set off the story of unsolved mysteries, and just another thing that keeps things rolling along, enduring the legend of the Lost Dutchman gold mine. And here we are today, making stories about the Lost Dutchman gold mine, piquing the interest of people. And the legend continues, and it always will continue, and just being a major mystery of the Superstition Mountains.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.